They got pizza over there?
All right, everybody, welcome to the SuperHouse Podcast. We have a very special guest this week. Ben's here as usual.
Hello.
And Ben, you actually got the connection for this guest, so why don't you introduce him?
Yes. So, as a very special guest, and to wrap up our series covering this month's movie on Batman Forever, we have the original screenwriters of Batman Forever, Lee and Janet Scott Batchler.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. So, let's see, about 10 years ago or so, I was a screenwriting student over at USC, and I found out that Janet was teaching over there, and I reached out to her and asked some questions about the movie. I also had her autograph my poster of the movie, which, by the way, is hanging up in my living room still.
I saw that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Andrew saw that at my birthday party. Yeah. And we kept in touch, and now, many years later, it's like, okay, well, now I'm covering this movie on the podcast. It would feel wrong for me not to at least reach out and see if she and Lee would be down to talk again. I'm sure there's going to be some overlap with what we already talked about, but again, that was like a decade ago, and I'm sure part of me may have forgotten some of the answers on these anyway. Yes.
Well, 20 years ago, I saw the movie in the theater.
Right.
And holy crap, this is wild actually talking to you guys. Thank you, Ben, for hooking this up.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, I'm originally from Alabama and Georgia, and I was just a kid in Alabama at the time in '95 that saw this movie. And it's great to be able to talk with you guys.
Mm-hmm. So the first question we had was before getting hired on it, what was your guys' history with Batman character or comics?
I wasn't allowed to read comics at home. I was, raised in a house where that was not acceptable. But every week, my mom would take me grocery shopping and let me sneak off to the little newsstand section of the store where there were comic books. And so I spent about an hour every week devouring the comic books. And I fell in love with Batman very quickly, in part because with the limited selection that was there, I didn't really see anybody that I could relate to. They didn't have Wonder Woman. I wasn't really interested in Archie. That was pretty much all that was available, but I had a couple of friends who were girls named Robin, and so I was like, well, maybe I couldn't be Batman, but maybe I could be Robin. Maybe a girl could be Robin because it's really a girl's name. And so that was sort of the way I found my way in and found my way able to relate to those comic books, which I just devoured. I didn't miss anything for years and years, sitting as a little girl, on the floor in this little corner of the local store, reading that week's comic books.
And I grew up in San Diego. I had a single mother raised me, and I had such a comic book collection. It was all DC stuff.
Awesome.
And my mom felt that my devotion to this many comics was an unhealthy thing. So I
can relate.
About 12 or 13, she made me get rid of all of them. And I now could cry over the editions of things that I had, first of, or, early, but would be worth a lot of money these days.
Oh, man.
Since Comic-Con, I could have sold this for, hundreds of dollars. So you have trauma in childhood, and you just try to use it, channel it through your art.
You're right.
Got it. Okay. So, I guess you guys teamed up on scripts, and I understand that it was Smoke and Mirrors that led to you getting hired for this film.
We wrote a movie called Smoke and Mirrors. It was a spec script. We wrote it during the spec script boom of the 90s. Spec script is one that you write hoping that somebody will buy it. You write it for free, and You want to sort of make your name with a spec script and get some attention. And we had sat down with our writers group and said we wanted to write a movie that would get us attention. That we went through a lot of.
We felt we were really good writers at this point. Nobody knows who we are.
Yeah.
We have to find a really great story that we can make a splash with, but it had to be a really great story because, a refined view of execution of a so-so story is still a so-so story, but a great story can get attention.
So Smoke and Mirrors was a story about, based on the true life exploits of one of the early pioneers of stage magic, Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, and particularly looking at an episode when he went to North Africa to expose some local sorcerers there as frauds because they were claiming to be gods and manipulating the people because they could do magic. Mm-hmm. And so we wrote a big splashy movie that in fact did get a lot of attention. And there was a bidding war during the course of a week between Disney and Warner Brothers. Disney ended up winning that bidding war. The movie actually has been in pre-production and fallen out twice. Fell out once because Sean Connery got sick and they weren't able to make the movie. And it fell out the second time because of 9/11, because they were going to be shooting in Morocco and they could no longer get insurance to shoot in a primarily Muslim country after 9/11. So that never got made, but it got us a lot of attention. And because Warner Brothers lost that bidding war, they ended up sort of offering us a lot of things that they owned. And we perhaps rather naively kept saying, I don't know if we're really right for that, and passing on things. So we passed on The Lone Ranger.
Passed on Lethal Weapon 4.
Lethal Weapon 4.
Passed on Wild Wild West, thank God.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Bullet dodged.
Yeah. And finally, they came back to our agent. And it's the power of no. We weren't trying to play hard to get. We weren't playing games with them. But because we kept saying no, they kept raising the ante. And they finally came back to our agent and said, we are offering you Warner Brothers' most important asset, was how they presented it.
Wow.
And
True.
When they presented it the exact same language to Joel Schumacher, he said, you're offering me Mel Gibson? So it shows you how things change over time. But that, of course, was the Batman franchise.
And we sort of felt at this point, they're offering us Batman. We cannot say no. We will never work for Warner Brothers again if we turn this down.
Right.
And of course, it was something we felt we understood. And it was like, yes, this is one we can do. Thank you for offering us one that's right.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. I understand then that you had some meetings with Tim Burton.
We did.
Yes. Initially, Tim was he had other things. He was working on Nightmare Before Christmas. He was sort of handing off the franchise to Joel, and he was sort of the designated, both the studio and Tim, to hand the baton off to. So we had to meet with him and sort of please him that we weren't going to go too far astray from what he had begun, because he sort of laid the foundation for this.
Right.
Yeah. So we had a phone conversation with him. We had some meetings with him. I think what really clicked, because we heard sort of his vision and where he wanted to see things go. And we had talked to Joel and heard his vision. And then it was our turn to come back with a take that everybody would sign off on. And we came back and we basically talked about how, that the heart of Batman is duality. That in Superman has a double identity, but everybody else is one person. Lois Lane is always Lois Lane. Lex Luthor is always Lex Luthor. But in Batman, everybody except maybe Alfred
The
has,
Penguins, Oswald.
Right.
yeah, everybody has a double identity. And so we started off with that and said, we feel that Batman is about duality. And Tim just said, yes. And that was really the moment at which we knew that we had the job.
Mm-hmm.
When you said that, what's his name, Schumacher told you his vision, what did he say his vision was?
Joel, I have to understand a little bit about his background because he's a visualist. He started out as a designer.
Mm-hmm.
He started out as a costume designer, as a production designer, and then got into directing. So he's very much about the cinema of it, about the image on screen. So he the vibrant colors of the 30s. I mean, there's very different eras of different Batmans.
Right.
And there was an era in the 30s into 40s that was extremely pop out colors. And he sort of envisioned a living comic book on screen.
Okay.
Yeah, that was what he was looking for. Lots of color, lots of movement, and very much taking it back to the original Bob Kane comic books.
Gotcha. Were there any notable things that Burton said when you guys were meeting with him on his vision?
No, he's a very gentle, erudite man. He's quiet. He seemed a little shy.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I think makes him a great artist, is there's, I think, a lot of, and this is true for a lot of directors, that they're a child at heart. Actors often, have to tap into their childhood imaginations and they sort of just let it out without all of the inhibitions that being a grown-up puts on you. And Tim sort of is kind of like that. He's full of enthusiasm, and there's a childlike quality in the very best sense that I think comes out in all of his work.
Right.
And I think Joel has that to a certain extent too, although he's
it manifests itself differently.
It manifests itself differently. Because he's a New Yorker and he's just like a more cosmopolitan guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Gotcha. Awesome. So what then led to the decision to do the two villains? We have Two-Face and Riddler in here. Did they originate from Burton, from Schumacher, from you guys? Where did these come from?
We had to face the problem that I think all of the Batman movies that Tim had, which is having two.
Well, just Batman Returns.
Batman Returns. Well, yeah, it's the too many villains problem.
Mm-hmm.
You've only got a limited amount of screen real estate, and how do you do justice to multiple characters? So our solution was, okay, let's try to turn this into an asset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it came down from the studio. The studio wanted two villains again. That was a given. We were not going to get to debate that. The studio had already decided that. And Joel had already decided he wanted Harvey Two-Face to be one of those villains.
He wanted Tommy Lee Jones.
And he'd already talked to Tommy Lee Jones about it, even though there was no story even to talk about.
Right.
So that was already sort of handed to us as a given. And they said, what other villains do you think would be fun? And so they put that in our lap. And we thought back to, we were really new into the reinvention of Batman, because Tim Burton's Batman movie really was the resurrection of the character on any size screen after a very, very long time. And the one that most people were going to be familiar with was the Adam West Batman from the TV show, which was still available on TV here and there in syndication. And so we sort of thought about, let's limit ourselves to those villains because they're going to be the ones that the audience will be familiar with, where some of the more esoteric or short-lived villains of the comic books just aren't going to play, or they're just not going to be right for the kind of living comic book, big Technicolor kind of movie that Joel wants to make. At that point, in the comic books, Batman was dealing with Bane, and it just was really clear that that was not going to play on the big screen in the Batman world that we were inheriting from Tim Burton. So with that, we chose the Riddler, and there was virtually no discussion of it. Basically, they're like, great, let's do the Riddler. What do you think about Robin Williams? And we're like, we like Robin Williams. And that was pretty much the discussion.
Right. And a curious thing, we hadn't really researched this, but it turned out that that in the comic books, there was no actual origin story for the Riddler. We wound up creating one.
Right.
We thought we were just making our own version. Turned out there actually had never been an actual Edward Nygma becomes the Riddler story in the comics.
He just appeared sort of fully formed,
full-fledged.
Right.
So that was fun.
Now back to the two villain problem. What we decided in terms of let's make lemonade out of lemons is that okay. We have to have two villains, but we've got a main character who has two identities. So let's make one of the villains Batman's enemy and make the other one Bruce Wayne's enemy. And that's how we structured the movie. And then they eventually come together, but we started them out as, the Riddler has a beef with Bruce Wayne.
Right. Yeah, I think I was telling Andrew this in a previous episode. We haven't released it yet, but that what I appreciate about this version of the Riddler is there's an actual explanation for why he dresses up in the costume. Because as you guys says in the comics, like he just kind of shows up. He's randomly in a mask and a suit, and he doesn't really have much of a dual identity. Everybody knows that the Riddler is Edward Nygma. He doesn't really have a reason, but the reinvention that you guys did, he actually has a dual identity. He does the whole mimicking of Bruce Wayne, of having a public persona as Nygma, while when he goes out at night, dresses up in green and everything, and nobody knows it's him. And there's an actual reason for it. So I really appreciate that side of it, because I don't think there's any other version that that actually explains it.
I was really surprised by that, because this was really my first introduction to the Riddler, really, because I don't think I'd seen him in an episode of the animated series, and I didn't watch a whole lot of the Adam West show growing up. So, and it seemed like the comic book world really wants to explain everything. So I was surprised. I was actually really shocked that he didn't have an origin story until this time.
Right.
We were surprised too.
Right.
we really were. Because we kept going back to the early comic books. We bought, bound collections of all the originals, and just read through them and tried to find even details that didn't make it into the movie, but details about the Batcave that we were trying to work in to honor sort of that era of Batman. And we kept saying, where's essentially Riddler #1? Where is it?
Right.
So we were shocked.
Yeah, another motivation we sort of tapped into was thinking why is the Riddler so against Bruce Wayne? And we just thought about all of the celebrity stalkings that go on even today, and that the crazed fans, and of course the root of the word fanatic is kind of fan. I don't know which way direction the words go, but they are related. So we thought, okay, here's this guy who works for Wayne Enterprises, and he's a fan of Bruce Wayne. The guy is hero. And then when you get disenchanted, that's when the turn comes.
Yeah, no, that's a powerful scene, as well as the fact that I always like the idea that Bruce Wayne sort of creates the Riddler by ignoring him and favoring the bat signal, sort of favoring the Batman side of
Right.
Again, there's no version of the Riddler's origin that's like that. Yeah. So you guys went through a lot of comic research to sort of find some explanation of Riddler and everything. What other comics did you guys end up reading?
We really mostly dived into Batman. We also read a bunch of, we still have some of it somewhere. We read a bunch of essays and psychological interpretations of Batman, a lot of academic stuff about Batman, to sort of see what are we missing that we can work into this. And then to complicate things, we were also told that they wanted to introduce Robin. So now we had even more characters to service. Right. So that was, we were juggling a lot of characters in limited screen space.
Yeah, I was telling Andrew earlier, I remember you telling me that the reason why Robin had a bigger family in the movie was actually due to your research into like circus families and circus acrobats, and that they wouldn't just have just the parents and the kid. There would actually be a bigger family, more than one kid.
Yeah, like the Flying Walendas.
Yeah, or at the time, our assistant was somebody who had grown up in the circus. She never went to actual school. She grew up in the circus. She was, in fact, the physical model for Circus Barbie, and she became a stunt woman. She was.
You go see her perform with L.A. Circus, riding Ty the elephant and doing tricks.
Yeah,
she was an aerialist.
She was an aerialist, and her father was a very well-known elephant trainer, and so we had sort of insight into the world of the circus, and we were able to talk to her about what it was like, and you know what were the tricks that Robin and his family would have been doing. And you know, these families do work together and teach one another, and you know, she learned from her mother, who was an aerialist, and so we drew a lot from that.
Gotcha. Yeah. As I was describing to Andrew, I'm just like, it does actually end up making a lot more sense in a way in terms of what you typically see with circuses and everything. So that definitely comes together. With the other research, I did notice there's kind of an influence of The Dark Knight Returns in terms of this idea that Bruce fell into the cave. And I did read a draft where, I don't know if this was you guys or Akiva Goldsman, where Batman kind of actually says some of the dialogue from Dark Knight Returns in terms of describing the bat that comes for him and everything. Was that one of the influences too?
A lot of that, I think, is actually Joel.
Really?
There's certain parts of the movie where he's sort of like, here's what I want, and he wanted a scene where the young Bruce falls down through the ground and discovers the Batcave. He sort of even described how he wanted it. So that was our job, is to put it on screen.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I also remember in the same script that I think, Janet, you told me this was Joel's idea, where in one of the original drafts, Riddler kind of gets his costume from a fortune-telling leprechaun at the circus. Was it Joel's idea?
That was also Joel's idea. That's sort of the kind of big, purely visual idea that Joel was going to come up with.
Hey everybody, it's Andrew. I just wanted to tell you about our friend Israel's retro gaming shop, Retro Co. If you go to retro-ko.com, you'll be able to see all of his retro gaming goodies. If you wanted to get that Sega Saturn hidden gem from back in the day, or if you wanted to get the Famicom disk system that you never got as a kid, or any other type of retro game that you were into, or import game, please go to retro-ko.com. That's retro-ko.com. And if you use the SuperHouse code Johnson's Ballsack, you'll be able to get a little bit of a discount at checkout. So please, once again, if you could just go to retro-ko.com. You can also go to facebook.com/retroko with no hyphen. That's RETROKO. You'll be able to find him on Facebook as well. If you were looking for that PlayStation import game that you never got, if you were looking for that Mega Drive game that you never got, or any other kind of retro game, any import game, it could even be European, Israel also curates bundles at Retro Co, and he'll curate that bundle just for you. So please go check him out. If you put in the code Johnson's Ballsack at checkout, you'll receive a SuperHouse discount.
He also, he basically at one point said, I want to see Batman run through a wall of flame.
Wall of fire.
A wall of fire. And it was like, I don't care how you get it. I don't care sort of what leads up to it. I want the visual of Batman running through a wall of fire.
Give me that shot.
And
you got carte blanche.
And you can do what you want to give me that shot. So we have to sit down and say, okay, wall of fire. How are we going to do that? And it is a great, great shot.
Oh yeah, it is one of my favorite shots of Batman in the whole movie.
Yeah. And in fact, what was interesting was we got to talk to the stuntman about his job. We were like, you're really Batman, aren't you? And he's like, yes, I am. He's like, Val Kilmer is Bruce Wayne, but I am Batman, which was sort of interesting. But we sort of asked, what do you like? What do you hate? And he hated the cape. The cape weighed 40 pounds. Oh. He hated the cape, but he said, except for the fire scene, because he ends up taking shelter under the cape, and they actually burned over him with fire.
Wow, that was real?
They had a special flame retardant cape for that shot.
Yes, for that shot. But he said that was the moment where he was very glad it was the cape.
So that flame retardant cape is actually a real life thing.
It's a real life thing. Yes.
One other question I had when it came to going back to the Riddler is we were kind of discussing in one of the drafts I read. He was originally named Lyle Heckendorf. Was this from you guys? Is this because did Nigma seem too out there, or was this before you found Nigma? Where did Lyle come from?
We thought he was just an ordinary guy, and of course Edward Nigma actually sounds like a made up name to go with the persona of the Riddler, Enigma. Mm-hmm. So we just, we gave him that name because
he's sort of a doofus name.
Working guy in the lab. And Mad Magazine actually somehow stole a script, and they did a spoof of Batman Forever before it came out, and they used the Lyle Heckendorf. So I said, okay, you guys at Mad Magazine, you're using a stolen script, because eventually it changed.
Right.
Yeah.
It probably didn't make sense to the public who didn't know where this Lyle name came from.
It might have even been from the treatment. We wrote a 33-page treatment before we wrote the script.
Yeah.
It just came out of your need to create an origin story for Riddler, basically. You just when you needed a name before. Basically. Okay, I gotcha.
Right, because he's a as they said, it's tough to come up with an origin for him when in the comics it's basically I want to challenge the police and leave riddles. It's not an origin.
Right.
Another creation you guys did was Chase Meridian.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I was explaining to Andrew that there's an actual, from what I remember you telling me, Janet, there's a significance to the name in terms of how it deals with his duality.
Well, Meridian, of course, is the line that divides two pieces of a map in half. Mm-hmm. And so that was her role in the movie, is to connect the two sides, the seemingly unconnected sides of Batman and Bruce Wayne. Let's face it, both sides of this person are really rather in need of some psychological help.
Right.
And yet, if Bruce ever really gets the psychological help he needs, he probably can't be Batman anymore. Mm-hmm. So there's a dilemma even in the idea of him seeking help, because is he abandoning his destiny and abandoning what he was meant to be if he gets healed himself? So we thought that, they wanted a love interest. We knew that we couldn't even begin to compete with Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. And we
decided they weren't going to bring back Vicky Vale.
And they weren't going to bring back Vicky Vale. So we thought, a psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. Let's give him a psychiatrist, especially if we're keying in on the dichotomy between Bruce and Batman.
And how unsettled he is of living that dual life.
Mm-hmm. Let's give him a psychiatrist as a love interest, someone who can see through that.
And the name Chase came from when I was growing up. in his later dancing days, Fred Astaire had done some television specials with his very young dance partner at that time was named Barry Chase. And I just loved the name Chase. I thought, what a great first name.
Gotcha. Awesome. I also figured that it was because he's sort of chasing the balance or chasing the middle in a way throughout this movie.
I mean, I think it's sort of we went there, but the name came first actually before the any meanings attached to it.
Gotcha.
Okay. Sometimes when you're naming characters in movies, it's an instinct thing. Something sounds good, sounds right. Mm-hmm. You know, and another name like, that's not that person. Let's try something else. Right. So you hit on something that just has the right music. Mm-hmm. We felt that had music.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was telling Andrew that I'm surprised that there wasn't already a psychiatrist love interest character before you guys came up with one.
It's surprising.
Yeah.
It really is.
Because it seems like such a natural thing to add to it. I did read a comic that incorporated Chase Meridian. I don't know if you guys have read this one, but it's by Mark Guggenheim. It's from an arc called Legends of the Dark Knight. She doesn't look like Nicole Kidman, but it is the same type of character is used.
I will have to check that out. Yeah, she couldn't look like Nicole Kidman because they wouldn't have permission to use her likeness.
Right. Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah.
I had a question real quick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So you guys write as a team, I assume, correct?
Yes.
So can you describe your dynamic as a writing team? I'm sure you've been asked this before, but like, what kind of stuff do each of you cover? Do you have some, strengths and weaknesses that you play off of each other, or what?
Yeah, we really do. It just sort of fell into place that the things that Lee is stronger at are the things that I'm weaker at, and vice versa. So we tend
Jen's a better structuralist.
Yeah, I sort of understand structure in a very primal way, but I tend to be maybe less than precise where dialogue is concerned. So it's sort of a yin and yang where we sort of fill the gaps that the other person has. We tend to beat story out really, really deeply and get a lot of story work done before we start writing. And then generally we rewrite each other. Sometimes what ends up happening when we're under the gun time-wise is that we'll divide a script and sort of sign up for scenes. You take these scenes, like one of us might write an entire storyline. And then we start patching the pieces together. We had very, very little time to work with Batman. So we were just turning out pages, handing them to each other, rewriting them, turning out more pages, rewriting them as fast as we could.
Okay. But dialogue is not necessarily your strong suit, not as strong
not
as
mine. Lee is a stronger dialogue.
Yeah,
I'm a stronger editor. He does sort of an overwritten first draft, and then I edit it way down.
I overwrite, kind of like Aaron Sorkin. Just like the words just flow out. And Jen will find, let's throw that out. Here's some gold. Here's some silver.
Like, here's the line that we really need, and everything else can go.
Right.
So that's sort of how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
I'm the free spirit.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
I was wondering, because we have been sort of revisiting the 90s movies, and it struck us that in the Tim Burton movies, Batman doesn't actually have that big of a role in those movies. And there was a clear sense in reading the original scripts and seeing, even in the final film, there's a sense of trying to refocus it back on the main character. So I imagine that was intentional on your guys' part.
Yeah, well, in the very first Batman movie, Jack Nicholson was such a powerful presence and as a powerful actor that he sort of, takes up a lot of the oxygen just by sort of the sheer power of him as a performer. So I think that's sort of the writing probably gravitated to let Jack be Jack to the maximum extent at the expense of probably some of the other characterizations.
Right. I could see that.
Yeah, because we sort of considered, after watching the performances, it was just like, well, we first saw Michael Keaton. Well, Keaton was, my first Batman. I think it was Andrew's first Batman.
Yes.
We love his performance, but Kilmer has the better characterization.
In the script from our side.
I really like his characterization. I thought it just was much more thoughtful and real.
Actually, this brings to the next question on the script. Actually, Ben,
Right.
So I'm sure there's some things that you thought could have been better with the movie, but what do you think actually turned out a lot better than you imagined would be when you saw the final film?
Well, I think it comes down to the casting, and maybe we're going to get into this later, but the original casting was to be for Michael Keaton, and the original casting was to be for Robin Williams, and maybe we'll come back to this as to why those changes. But when Jim Carrey was cast, there's a part of me that sort of, when I went into the movie to the premiere just to see it, I was like, there's a part of me like still hoping I'd seen Robin Williams' performance in my mind, saying those lines, and then to have Jim Carrey say some of those same lines and deliver it as good or even better than I imagined Robin, and
in a completely different way than we had imagined.
That was a delightful surprise.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm. It actually is really. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh no, it's just when I after hearing that Robin Williams was the original actor, and reading the scripts and dialogue, it's still really hard for me to not envision Jim Carrey's delivery of everything. Yeah. It's just so ingrained in me.
Well, it's so trite to say he made it his own, but he truly, truly did. Mm-hmm. He truly did. There were moments that, I knew every line in the script, and there were moments where he surprised me.
Awesome.
Is there, I guess, anything from your original ideas, original scripts that you wish made it into the final film?
That's a tough one, because the original story that we wrote was Robin Williams' character was much more verbose, obviously, because we were writing for his comedic, I won't call it a shtick, his style of rat-a-tat delivery. There was a lot more of that, and that got thinned out in the rewrites and in the production and with the recasting. So there's some of that didn't make it into the movie because the movie got a little leaner, and I think Akiva did some very good work there in terms of thinning out, because he's a very good craftsman at that. But the essence of the story was pretty much there. We tell our friends, don't ask us about how Batman got down.
And the Batmobile went up the side of the building. Yeah, it's like, no, we wouldn't have done that.
There's some little detours in the movie that it took that we didn't really have anything to do with. But all the important beats of the movie that we wrote was there, and the editor Dennis Verkler, we talked with him on the lot during the shooting, and he was very, very gracious to us. He said, I'm looking out for you guys, and he really did keep the essence of what we wrote on screen, and so very little of our stuff wound up on the cutting room floor.
Were you able to see dailies, or were you on set ever?
Yeah, we were on set several times. We didn't see dailies. Okay. I don't think that's something that writers would expect.
I saw one set of dailies.
You did?
I think I went.
Oh, did you go? Yes, and I didn't go? Okay.
I saw one set of dailies.
Okay. But we were there for the scenes that were shot at the Pantages Theater, which was the introduction of the box.
That's the Pantages.
Yes, that was shot in the lobby of the Pantages. Wow. So look at it the next time.
I will.
Yeah. And then we went down to the Spruce Goose Hangar. They shot a lot of stuff down at the Spruce Goose Hangar in Long Beach.
Next to the Queen.
And we went down and we were on set down there as well for several of those shots.
Yeah, I went down into the Batcave, and I said, "This is what I want for my office."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because that's where they built the Batcave. So we got to be there for a fair amount of that.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that there were some bits about the Batcave that you had that you originally were trying to explain, or anything. I wanted to go back to that since you just mentioned the Batcave, and I was reminded of that.
Oh, there were some things in the Batcave that we had pulled from the comics that didn't make it in. That giant Lincoln's head penny.
Yeah.
We were always like, what is that giant penny doing there? And we've sort of thrown some of that stuff in as sort of Easter egg homages to the comic book fans. And the look just was, you can sort of see the look wouldn't tolerate that kind of thing in the Batcave. So sort of the bright colors, the neon, the wild canted angles and so on are really more above ground, and the Batcave becomes almost monochromatic in the design.
Gotcha. So it was originally just like an Easter egg, or was there a story explanation for it? Or was it just the background?
No, we never found a story explanation. Okay. We were trying to put those little details in. They ended up getting cut out. But I think Barbara Ling did a wonderful job with the production design. Mm-hmm. We are crossing our fingers for her to be nominated and win for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood next year. Mm-hmm.
She did a great job on that.
Yeah.
I still want to see Batman movie, though, with the Batcave, with a giant penny, and the T-Rex robot.
Yeah.
They need to explain it, but
let's hope
I'd still
Matt
like to
Reeves
see it.
has some of that in there. We'll see.
After the movie, it's funny because I'm going to do... I cover a lot of the scripts that weren't made, or the original scripts and everything, and one of those was a script called Batman Dark Knight by Lee Shapiro and Stephen Wise, and they mentioned you guys actually as having... They consulted with you about it. I was wondering if you could talk about that for a bit.
I don't remember much about that. We had a conversation that was sort of like diving into some of the things we've talked about here about the duality of Batman and so on. But we didn't go much further with that. I think it was just a conversation.
Gotcha. I haven't read the script yet. I just have a copy of it where it has an intro where they talked about it a little bit.
And forgive me, Ben, I feel like you've told me this before and I forgot, but were you guys were the ones that wrote the Red Book stuff and the big scene of Batman's arc being cut out as far as like meeting this huge bat in a cave?
Or was that Akiva?
That was Joel.
That was him. Okay.
That was Joel, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Joel. There's a lot in the movie. Joel did a very gracious thing that I don't know directors ever do. He was finishing up filming on the last few scenes of The Client, which is a John Grisham book. He's down in New Orleans. So he flew us out so that, he's directing some scenes, but then we'd go back to his hotel and we would, sit around, lay down on the couch, sort of brainstorm. We throw out ideas to him. He threw out ideas to us. Yes, I like that. Oh, definitely do that. No, I don't like that. Let's move on. And then he brought out the editor, Dennis Verkler, because he said, these are the two people at the beginning of a movie and at the end of a movie
who shaped the movie, and they never meet.
And so he thought it would be just cool.
True.
And I think that really paid off for the good of the movie, because Dennis was in at the very beginning on sort of what our vision for it and what Joel's vision was. And then at the tail end of it, he's trying to keep it all together keep it all in harmony. It's as opposed to so many cooks and I want this and no, I want that and fighting. He's trying to keep it all in harmony. And I think
especially with so many moving parts.
Yeah. So I think him putting us all together in the same city and sometimes in the same room was a really healthy thing. And I wish more filmmakers would do that.
Mm-hmm. It does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, should happen more. Yeah, it definitely sounds
exactly.
like it should.
It just occurred to me, I think, Lee, you mentioned that you were going to get back around to talking about why it didn't necessarily work out with Michael Keaton and Robin Williams.
Well, that comes down, I think, to money.
Enough said.
because Michael Keaton had been in now 2 very successful movies. his agency. I don't know if we should say who they are or not, but they wanted an arm and a leg, and they wanted $15 million for Michael and a piece of the gross and merchandising.
And the studio didn't want to pay that.
Yes.
So we started off believing we were writing for Michael Keaton, and I had to switch pretty early on. Pretty early on, Joel told us that he was offering it to Val Kilmer, and that's who we were now writing for.
Right. And then the same thing with Robin Williams is that, well, if Michael Keaton is getting $15 million and a percentage of the gross and a percentage of the merchandising, well, then that's what we're asking for our client too. And so Warner Brothers sort of had a moment of truth, like I said, wait a minute. Already, forget the percentage of the gross. We're spending $30 million on 2 actors, and we're not shooting a frame of film yet.
Jeez. Yeah.
Oh,
Let's think about recasting.
And that's in, early 90s, millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So, we know somebody who had worked with Robin and knew Robin, was able to talk to him about it. He read the script, he wanted to do it. I mean, this is like one of the great moments of my life is that Robin Williams wanted to do something that we wrote. And he wanted to do it. And his agency said, don't worry, they have to come to you. There is nobody else in town who does what you do.
And if there were, we would represent them.
And they made an offer to Jim Carrey that weekend. And Robin found out about it when he read it in the trades.
Oh my God.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
Yeah. So
it is,
we switched gears there too. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, did you have like a pretty fleshed out draft at that point? Like, how far were you into before you had to switch gears?
The first draft was done at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. He'd read the draft. He loved it. So basically, he felt we captured his voice.
Nice.
We were writing to the Robin Williams stand-up guy,
and we were like, oh. Sort of like our careers are done. We have accomplished what. So
yeah,
but that was not meant to be.
Yes.
Oh, man.
I would have loved to have seen. I love Jim Carrey's performance in it. I would have loved to have seen Robin Williams too, especially because as I was showing Andrew in some of the original comics, Riddler looks exactly like Robin Williams. And how he's originally drawn.
He
does.
does.
Like, damn, that would have been perfect casting.
Yeah.
And then when it came to Chase Meridian, they had to recast because once they went to Val Kilmer, he was younger than Michael Keaton. They'd cast Rene Russo as the love interest, and she's just a little older for Val Kilmer, sort of visually. So what I think is probably very disappointing for her. But Warner Brothers said, "Okay, we're going to ask you just to step aside, but we are promising you." An A movie with an A script, A cast. We're giving you another big budget movie. They gave her Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman, which was a hit movie. But she was originally going to be Chase Meridian, and
she got to be
Florence. She was replaced with Nicole Kidman.
Gotcha.
Cool.
I feel like we don't have a whole lot of time left. I just wanted to ask one last thing from me, and then maybe Ben will have one more after that, and that'll be it. But if you were offered to write Batman today, what would you do differently? Like, what kind of Batman movie do you want to see these days?
Well, now I think we're living in a more complicated world.
Yes.
We're living in a world that has a lot more ambiguity in it. So I think Batman is a really good hero to explore that. I mean, we love the Marvel extended universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I don't think that those heroes are by and large able to explore some of the psychological depths that Batman has in him.
I think Tony Stark does.
Right. Instead.
Yes.
Right. But I think that was a character.
Yeah.
That
But
had
most of
depth.
them don't. And I think that taking Batman not necessarily to sort of the dark place of the Christopher Nolan films, but back into the world of ambiguity. because the thing about Batman is that he is dark, but he is also light. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a hard tightrope to walk. I think that most portrayals of Batman choose one side or the other, but walking down the middle would be really interesting in this time, in this era, to sort of see how is he dealing with that double pull on his personality. And I think a really interesting question would be to just find a way to explore what happens, the issue of what happens if he does want to be healed.
That's very true.
Yeah, and of course the whole concept of Batman Forever was that he doesn't think that he can keep this going, which is why he needs to, talk to psychiatrists. At one point in the movie, he decides, I'm going to pack it in because I don't want Dick Grayson to go down the same rabbit hole that I went down. So that tension. I also, to answer your question, what would I do differently? I am not a nihilistic writer. I'm sort of I have a very romantic, almost a Richard Curtis view of life. So I'm not afraid of writing dark. I'm fine with writing dark, but there's got to be light. And I think that sometimes these kinds of movies go too far to where it's just all darkness, darkness, darkness. And I think that can lead to an empty experience for an audience. I think they need to have a full meal.
I agree. I agree with that.
I think so too. It's funny because my last question was your guys' opinion on the Batman movies that came out afterwards, and considering the response to Batman versus Superman, I think I already kind of know what your opinion was on that.
They're beautifully crafted.
They're beautifully crafted. They're a different, look, I think one of the strengths of the character of Batman is the massive interpretations that this character allows. I mean, we've, from Bob Kane to The Dark Knight is a huge, huge leap.
Yeah,
from Adam West to Christopher Nolan is an enormous span for one character to cover. And I think it shows the depths to be plumbed in this character. So, we looked at all of, say, the Dark Knight movies, and we were able to just sort of say, well, that is just not our Batman. That is a different Batman. Mm-hmm. But there is room for more than one Batman. In some ways, it's like saying, well, Hamlet's been done. So we really aren't ever going to see anybody else take on Hamlet. There are characters that are worthy of being explored from different points of view. Mm-hmm. Now we even have Lego Batman.
Yes.
So I think there are a lot of points of view to use coming at Batman. And I don't have any issue with other people exploring other facets or other takes on this character. Mm-hmm. It's not a character we invented. But we've found the continuing interpretation of this character to continue to be fascinating.
Yeah, one of the things when we look at a project, if we're offered just to come onto something, we ask ourselves, is this a world that we want to live in for, 2 months, 6 months, even a year? Mm-hmm. And if it's too dark and depressing and nihilistic a world, that's probably we're not the right writers for it. But there are other writers that are just brilliant at that stuff, and we can admire that, and they're comfortable with that. So, each artists have different comfort levels of what they're good at. And I think we sort of know what's right for us, but that doesn't mean we don't appreciate people who are a different sensibility than us. We do.
I was telling Ben earlier on one of the previous episodes that I feel like now more than ever there's an acceptance for all kinds of Batman. Like, it felt like in the 90s that people kept referring back to Burton.
They want Frank Miller type.
And Frank Miller type.
Right.
But now it's like you have like Batman 66 comics doing well, the Batman 66 animation.
It's a show about Alfred.
There's a show about Alfred. You know, like people accept all kinds of Batman now, and I think that's really cool, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that's a good note to end on.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, guys.
Thank you
been
so
awesome.
much.
Thank you
it's
for
our
talking
pleasure.
to us. Our pleasure.
Oh, man. I guess that's it.
I think
All
that's
right.
it. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
take
All
care. Bye. All right. So we just talked to Lee and Janet Scott Batchler, screenwriters of Batman Forever, and I think we both learned a lot in terms of. I mean, some of it was stuff I already covered, and this is kind of just me verifying for the sake of saying
Some
I'm not
of
pulling
that-
shit out of my ass.
Some of that's new trivia, though, isn't it? Don't you think?
Which part? Oh well, I didn't know about the giant penny thing.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't know about
We
that.
uncovered some little trinkets there, I think,
Yes.
with that stuff. But yeah, it was incredible, man. I mean, like I said in the beginning, this was a movie that I saw, of course, and when I was a kid, and to go from that kid that saw it in the theater to talking to the screenwriters now. I mean, everybody in LA is like, whatever. Like, maybe Ben's like, I feel like, yeah, whatever. But like, I don't know, man. It's like, if you're listening to this and you're not from LA, then you kind of know the kind of like mystical pedestal that Hollywood is put on, and it's some land that we can never really visit. And but I visited it today a little bit more. I mean, I don't know. I'm talking to my ass a little bit, but you know, something in that direction. Anyway, catch us out on Patreon, patreon.com/SuperHousePodcast. I'm Thunderwolf Drew on Instagram and Twitter. SuperHouse is on all the social media, anything that you want. We're there. If we're not there, message us at superhousepodcast@gmail.com. And Ben is...
Ben Juan Ryder at Instagram.
And this concludes our 4-part series on Batman Forever.
Who knew it was going to take this long?
I can't believe it. But, Ben, what's next, man?
Next, we dive into more rubber nipples and neon lights and Joel Schumacher with a viewing and revisit of Batman and Robin.
Probably going to just be a one-parter on that one.
We will see. Does it live up to the reputation, or is there something redeeming about it? We have not seen this movie since we were kids. So, how will it look now after seeing it? There is no deep dive episode. Unfortunately, Batman Forever is probably the last one that I will have to do a deep dive into the scripts, the previous scripts of it. However, as hinted in this episode, that doesn't mean we'll be done covering scripts or material of Batman that hasn't been made. I might be doing a deep dive into what could have been the sequel to Batman and Robin.
That's incredible. I'm really looking forward to that one, obviously.
Probably more than the movie.
More than the movie.
Yeah, as usual, we look forward to talking about movies more than watching the
I'll
movie.
tell you right now, man, when we were going, when I was I ran to the theater from my car when I was a kid. Ran. I could not wait to see Batman and Robin.
Really? Yes.
Yes. I remember this because some other kid screamed at me, "Run, Forrest, run!" And it was my first time ever hearing somebody say that in jest.
Wow. Okay.
Because it was like, what, 97 or something?
1997, yeah.
So I was in 7th grade, I think, or summer of, so I was going to be entering 7th grade. And so, yeah, that gives you my age. But I was like, man, this guy's saying, "Run, Forrest, run." What?
Why is he saying that? Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I was excited to see the movie, and then of course let down. Anyway, yeah, I guess we'll get into that later. I kind of predict that I'll be more accepting of it.
I think so
now.
too. I think we will be. It'll be interesting to see, is Clooney actually the worst Batman, or does he just get a bad rap because of the movie he's surrounded by?
I want to say with adult eyes for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can also get to see the full, because I know, like, we talked about, like, Schumacher's Batman versus Burton, and we already are seeing, okay, there's a better focus on the Bruce Wayne character.
Yeah.
Does that continue with this one?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I already have
Yeah.
some ideas based
I
on what
wonder.
I remember. Yeah.
I just feel like if I go in just thinking this is Adam West Batman reimagined for the 90s, which it's pretty much what it is.
Yeah,
I feel like
absolutely.
if you can accept Adam West Batman, then why can't you accept this? You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
just trying to have an open mind about these movies that are generally shit on.
Right.
So
I mean,
you don't know these writers, do you?
Akiva Goldsman.
Oh yeah. Was it just him on this one?
It was just him on this one.
Oh,
so
that's all right.
I have less to read this time.
Okay.
Because Akiva Goldsman was the one that sold. This is the only Batman movie of the '90s Batman movies where the original vision sounds like it went directly from original vision to the stage or to the screen.
And that's a bad thing.
Well, again, let's see what we think.
Maybe we should have had some studio interference.
Maybe should have been when there was studio interference. Not any of this previous stuff, because we got some of the best material cut from the previous versions, and this one I don't even know what was. I mean, there is a copy of the Batman and Robin script online. However, I don't think there's anything different about it based off of what I've seen of it. So it's probably we're not going to do a deep dive into what could have been, but deep dive into what could have followed.
Sounds great.
Stay tuned.
Signing off.
Bye.